Hello, welcome to my webinar, which I'm preparing for you now. Normally, at this time of year, I'd be coming in and talking to you in person. I'm a bit disappointed I'm not there. So what I've done is I've borrowed some books to make me look quite bright, and I'm going to take you on some adventures in learning, if that's all right. My name's Howell Roberts, and I'm a teacher educator, and I'm a writer. And it's a real privilege to be asked to do this with you, just for 45 minutes or so. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll get together and we'll do some sort of Q&A with Jane online. And I'll be able to answer some of your questions like I would do if I was in the room with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen, if that's all right. I've got a bit of a PowerPoint, which I know we all love. And I'm just going to talk through some stuff. And the idea is that this is useful stuff. So I know you're watching it probably in your own homes or whatever. Get a notebook if you can, and get some of this stuff noted down. Because the other thing that I'm going to try and share with you in the short time that I've got is some of the research as well. And the research might help you with any assignments you've got to write and so on. So I've called it Adventures in Learning. I've just put on there on that first slide, you can see just towards the bottom there, you can see I label myself up as a travelling teacher because I don't work full-time in any schools now. I worked for a long time in various schools in West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. And now I just travel around and I share my practice. I do CPD in classrooms, live in classrooms with teachers watching me teach their children. And I model some of the things I'm going to talk to you about in this little session. That's a picture of me there in an early years classroom. You can see I'm there, and you can see why that's probably one of my favourite photographs of my work, essentially. I'm not an early years natural. I go in there. It's not always easy. I had a bad experience on my first teaching practice myself many years ago. When actually I looked around and I thought, I never ever want to come into early years ever again. And that's because I was witness to what the teachers called a brown alert. In that class, in that photo that you can see there, I think you can see why it's my favourite picture. There he is, that little boy, Billy. And it's fair to say that in that picture, the kids are having a nice time. What's actually happening there is you're seeing the grown-up, me, with his face pressed against the edge of his comfort zone. I am absolutely digging deep in that session. These kids have all been to a farm in the morning. This is a school in Leeds. They've all been to a farm, and then they've come back, and I've gone into the session, and I asked him about the farm, and I said, so what did you see on the farm then? And Billy, that little boy, he said, oh, it was a right mess, he said. And I thought that was hilarious. And it was a right mess. So I said, what was wrong with it? And he said, well, the gate was broken. There was a light bulb missing inside. And then all of his pals started joining in. And one of the kids said, and there was a window broken. And essentially, we ended up with a snagging list for the farmer, things that were wrong with the farm. And I asked the kids, were you the only visitors on the farm? And they were all like, yes, we were. I said, what did you hear on the farm? What did you hear? And Billy, that little boy, he started going, and I was thinking, what are you doing? Why are you humming like that? And then I thought, I wonder if the farmer kept bees. So I said, did the farmer keep bees? And he went, and all the kids are joining in, by the way. And I said, did the farmer keep bees? And little Billy said, oh, no, it's the M1 motorway. It's the M1. And I started laughing then. And as soon as I started laughing with them, I started to relax a bit. I also asked them, what did they smell? Because they were doing some work on sensors. I'd seen that on the walls. I said, what did you smell on the farm? I probably shouldn't have asked that. Anyway, at the end of the session, I went to sit in the staff room with the early years staff. And it was the end of the school day. And we started talking about Billy. And I said, what a little character he is. You know, what a little legend, I said. And they were like shaking their heads and smiling. And I said, what is it? And they said, well, it's a bit of a surprise, really, because he's not normally like that. And I said, you're joking, aren't you? I said, he's the kind of kid you need in your class. He's up front, he's answering questions, he's mint. But they said, no, he's not normally like that. You see, what they expected from him when I walked in my Matalan suit is that they expected him to hide, to get under the table, to get behind a curtain, because he's one of those kids who absences himself if he's not very happy. And they were really surprised that he responded in the ways he did to me. Now, we had a chat about this, and I'm still having trouble articulating it. Essentially, they decided that he reacted the way he did because he had some knowledge. He was the one that went to the farm, not me. I was having to ask him about what he knew, and he was able to tell me. So in a sense, and as I say, I'm still struggling with this, in a sense, he'd already lifted himself to the curriculum. What we'd done in the session is that I ended up just saying, look, let me be the farmer. I'll speak as the farmer. Can you help me? No one's visiting my farm. It's very untidy, I know. And there's things that are broken, I know. If you're going to help me, what do you think you can do? And that photograph is a picture of them when they just all fell to their knees and started cleaning the floors, miming, role-playing, playing. The teachers considered that, and we started to think more about play, and we started to think particularly about iterative play. An iterative play is where the children play, I'm sure you know this, the children play, but actually there's little difficulties and little dilemmas that they have to solve in order for the play to work, if you like. So I'll come back to that later. Bottom line is, Billy has resulted in me reflecting a lot about him. I do presentations like this a lot, and I always start with him because I'm still thinking about him. He's a real boy, you can see him. And I've put there that he's my evidence base, because in my head, he's always someone I go back to. Because even though I've been teaching for 26 years, which is older than some of you, you know, even though I've been teaching for that long, I still don't think I've nailed it. I'm still reflecting, and I'm still researching, and I'm now slightly balding. That's what happens when you get on a bit. Now, my background, just so you know, you can see that there. Hopefully that's playing okay for you. What you got there is Billy Casper in the film Kes, based on the brilliant Yorkshire novel, A Kestrel for a Knave. There's my original copy from when I was a young lad. If you don't know that film or that book, I think you owe it to yourself. If you're going to be a teacher and hopefully be a teacher in Yorkshire, then you need to watch that. You need to read it. Maybe you studied it at school. I was originally a secondary teacher, and then having spent a lot of time looking at curriculum models and so on, in secondary, I moved to SEMH, social, emotional, mental health, where I started to work not just with key stage 3 and 4 children and young people. I started working with primary, and it tickled me a little bit that I remember sitting with a little boy, and he said to me, "Mr. Roberts, why do we have to do Romans?" And I said, "Maxwell, we have to do Romans because they're on the curriculum." And he said, "But they're ages ago. But they're ages ago." And I thought, you're right, son. And so as teachers, we had to sit down and we had to think, how do we make Romans matter for little Maxwell? Because he's got enough on without having to learn about, Romans from ages ago. So in this session, I just want to touch on that just a little bit, if that's okay. Because we're doing it like this, we're doing it as a video and so on. Even if I was with you, we wouldn't have the kids with you. So all I've got is anecdotes and stories for you, and maybe some images of me working with children. But all of these are stories. Now, as primary practitioners, stories and narratives are going to be really important to your practice. If you think you've just, every time we send a text to someone, we're adding to a narrative. If we're in a WhatsApp group, a sort of narrative is constantly unfolding. Stories and narratives really are the bread and butter of our practice. So I'm going to illustrate that in this session. But you can see how important stories are here. This is Daniel Willingham. It's a great quote, this. He talks about stories being psychologically privileged, meaning if learning and learning objectives are wrapped up in narratives, then actually the learning sticks a little bit more. I absolutely believe if I went and met Billy again now, even a year or so later, if I went to see him, I think he'd remember what we did that afternoon, because we couched it all in a story. We'd couched it all in a narrative. A lot of my work at the moment, particularly over lockdown, was working with schools remotely, redesigning their curriculum. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Redesigning their curriculum, putting stories at the heart of what they do. I just want to flash this in front of you, because what you could do is pause the video at this point, because I flashed that statement in front of you because it seems to me that we're constantly, as teachers and developing teachers, as trainee teachers, one of the key touchstones to being an educator that we all share is the fact that we all went to school, and that we all perhaps remember great teachers. I like to think that you remember great teachers. I know there may be one or two of you watching this saying to yourself, "I don't remember any good teachers. They were crap." And that's sad if that was you. But if that is you, I just wonder if you can have a little think about what is it that made them not so good? What is it that made a memorable teacher really good? Really good. And one of the things, for example, just to help your thinking, is passion. Now, you can't go on a course for passion. I don't think you can have a lecture about passion. But what I'm hoping you have is a teacher heart. And that when you think about the teachers who had a positive impact on you when you were at school, which might not be that long ago for you, I'm hoping that what you saw in them was a teacher heart, a bit of passion around what they do. The trouble with teaching, as I'm sure you found out, is that it's complex. And nobody watching this film that I'm making for you now, no one watching it is going to be sitting around thinking, "Oh, I haven't got enough on. I've got plenty of time to do anything." Everyone, if you're involved in education, you've got enough on. You are busy, and it's hard. And what's happened in teaching, certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, is that it's been broken down into components, into parts. And indeed, I think I've done that. But we've got to be very careful when we do that, because what can happen is that any humanity that exists in the practice of teaching just gets sucked out. It can get eroded. So what you end up with is basically a bullet point sheet, a sheet with bullet points on it, telling you what it is to be a good teacher. And I think that's dangerous. It's what Billy Bragg's saying in this quote here. I like to quote Billy Bragg when I can. Here's a more research-led quote. Have a read of it while I bang on. Teachers teach differently. We can't all teach the same. We all have to teach the same things, which I'm going to come back to in a moment, but the way we teach them is kind of up to us. There is a sense of freedom around that. I share stories a lot and anecdotes about teaching, and I still go into classrooms and teach because I'm still researching, as I said earlier. It's complex. One thing we can be clear on, and I know you're familiar with this model, is that in primary, in early years, and certainly in my belief in secondary and beyond, we need to place the child at the centre of what we do. If you like, kids are the centre of our universe. We are child-centred. And then around that centre of the universe, we have these satellites, all of which are absolutely vital. For instance, accountability. It's not a free-for-all. Teaching is an art, it's a science, it's a multitude of skills. But those things need to be held to account. So I haven't got any problem with someone coming to judge me and talk to me about my practice, as long as I have a right to reply. And also, as long as I respect the person talking to me. But that's just me. We've got curriculum. And the great thing about curriculum at the moment in our conversations around education in England is that curriculum is there. It's what people are talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we've got values. Values are not just the values of the school or institution you find yourself working in, the sort of, landing page of the school website where it says independence, thriving, flourishing, all those really upbeat, positive words, and then you nip in and everyone's doing twinkle worksheets. No, values, it's about your values, your moral compass. What is it that you're doing that helps you navigate all the accountability, all the curriculum stuff, whilst building your skills? If you're going to be the teacher that a future trainee is going to aspire to, what is it that you've done? And if you're still figuring that out, that's fine, because it can take some time. And the child is at the centre. My worry is that sometimes the accountability ends up in the centre. The curriculum ends up in the centre. The values hardly ever end up in the centre. They never get their turn. But the child, for us, that's our value. That's one of our core values, is that the child is at the centre. I really love that model, and it's a pleasure to share that with you now. So we can agree teaching's rock hard. It's like crash helmet testing. Working with kids is challenging, and I'm sure we've already got a lot of stories about funny stuff that happens in class. I mean, working with kids is a bit like being pecked to death by seagulls. And curriculum, can you appreciate that picture, by the way, because it took me ages to set that up. Curriculum is the thing, if you like, that we have to carry around. So let's think about curriculum for a minute. All curriculum, right? Get this. All curriculum is cold and dead. Cold and dead. Because it's been written down. As soon as we write anything down, it loses its humanity. A teacher's job, a great teacher's job, is to take that cold, dead document sitting on the school server and it's Key Stage 1, Year 1, the Great Fire of London, and they breathe life into it. You humanise it. You turn it into something that Maxwell is going to buy into. And that, colleagues, is the great challenge for you. How are you going to warm up a cold curriculum? Now, we can break curriculum into two. The first area is the area that you are really concentrating on at the moment. It's what you should be teaching. What is it you need as a Year 4 teacher? What is it that you've got to deliver to children? What is your should curriculum? You've got to teach them this, 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 and this. They need to know these things. It's on the website. We've got to deliver this stuff. That's your should, okay? But then we've got this other aspect, this other area, which is the could curriculum. And the could curriculum is your pedagogy. Your could curriculum is your warming up. It's how you're going to deliver the cold facts, the cold, hard information. And colleagues, it's difficult, particularly as trainees. As trainees, we're just building our toolkits, aren't we? And I've already said to you, I'm still learning. So I'm afraid the toolkit never gets completed, sadly. But if I just reiterate, there's the should curriculum, which is the stuff you've got to teach so that you sleep well at night. And then you've got your could curriculum. And your could curriculum is how you're bringing that should curriculum to life. I hope that makes sense. Now, I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures. The first picture is this one. And it might not be familiar to you, this. But this picture is from a film called Dead Poets Society. And this film was it had a big impact on me. I went to the cinema to see it with my pal, Big Craig. And when we came out of the cinema, I said, Craig, I know what I want to do with my life. And he said, what? And I said, I want to be a teacher of American literature in a 1950s high school. And I want the children to lift me on their shoulders and carry me through fields of gold to the soundtrack of Beethoven. And he said, knock yourself out. I saw that film and it's all about a really inspirational teacher. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. I really want to do that. I want to make a difference. Then I went on teaching practice, having signed up to do teacher training. And I went on teaching practice in Dewsbury. And I realised that actually teaching couldn't always be like that image. And in fact, I found a picture that sums up what teaching is more like. It's like that. We are the horse. We are beautiful, well-groomed creatures, and yet we can often feel quite trapped, quite overwhelmed, quite under pressure. And there's always someone on a learning walk or an observation, Ofsted, coming in to check out what you're doing, represented here by the laughing cow. So it's hard, and we know that. So I've been spending most of my career trying to think, well, how do we make it not just more accessible to our students and our kids, but how do we make it more interesting for us? Because you know what, and this is quite important. I'm going to use the F word now. It's all right for teaching at times to be fun. I'll let that sink in. And I mean fun for you. And if we don't like the word fun, let's use the word engaging. I like to be engaged in what's going on in my own classroom. So I think it's quite important. Let me give you a good story, and just stick with me on this. Obviously, you're watching this as a video, so you can pause it if you want. But this story is really important, and it underpins a lot of what I'm talking about. And it's a good illustration of the warm and the cold. Okay, so there's two schools in Manchester. One of them I'd describe as a very warm school. When you go in there, it's like someone's giving you a bowl of hot soup. It's great. And when you get through the airlock, you know, like you have in primary schools, you get through the airlock and I see the teachers and they're all dead busy. And I see the kids and they're all, not, I was going to say crackers then, but they're busy kids, but they're orderly. You know, there's a set of expectations that has been superimposed on this little community in this warm school, and it's working. Down the road, there's a different kind of school, and it is literally down the road. I could park at the warm school and walk down the road to the cold school. It's on a busy main road. When I go in the cold school, you walk in, and on reception, there's Joy. She needs to go on a course. And you don't get hot soup there. You don't get a bowl of big soup. You get like a cup of soup that no one's put any hot water in. You get through the airlock and you see the teachers, and they're very hardworking and committed people, and they're a bit harried and a bit rushed. The children are just like the children in the other school, because these two schools are serving the same community. What the cold school's done, which is brave and not innovative, but it's a brave action, they've got in touch with the warm school and said, can you come and help us out with some stuff? For example, the Senko in the cold school is an RQT, is a recently qualified teacher. So it's fair to say they are lacking experience, but they'll be learning on the job, which is really valuable. So the cold school says, can we set up a meeting with the Senkos? So that's what happens. So a very experienced Senko from the warm school goes and sits with the Senko, the less experienced but committed Senko in the cold school. And great CPD happens, which is sitting and having a brew and talking about business. The literacy lead goes from the warm school to the cold school, does the same thing. And then I'm asked to go down and have a listen and have a chat and go and have a look at what's going on in classrooms. So I end up in a year 3 classroom. And when I walk in, I'm having a look round, a little boy comes running up to me with his book and he's like, check it out. He's a little mank, check it out. Check out my book. He's got tram lines in his blonde hair and a little tail at the back. He's a funny little kid. And he's just showing me his book. It's later I realised that he's showing me his book because I've walked in, he thinks, oh, there's a stranger. It must be someone doing a book scrutiny. So I get his book and I have a look. And I say, what have you been doing? And he says, we've been doing Vikings. And I say, oh, check it out, look. And he's got loads of stuff in his book, loads of stuff stuck in. And he shows me the last piece of work he's done is a plan of a Viking house. And he's labelled it up and he's showing me. I said, what's that? And he says, that's where I sit and eat. And I went, oh, brilliant, what's that? He said, that's where I sleep. I'm like buzzing. What's that? He said, that's where we keep our animals. And I said, inside the house, which we know the Vikings might have done. And he said, oh, yeah, we keep them in. So facts-wise, this kid is knowledge rich in that moment. I said, what's this over here? And he said, oh, that's my chill-out area. And I said, what happens in your chill-out area? And he said, well, I sit in the hot tub and I just watch the telly. So at that moment, I honestly, I'm giggling to myself because it's kind of sweet, you know. He's got his own little Viking chill out area with a telly and that, and a hot tub, which is hilarious. But I know, and you know, that actually that's now in his book, and it's not a great reflection. on what's been going on in class. He's got other knowledge, he's knowledge rich, but what he isn't is context rich. He's not got it, has he? Because he's put a telly in there. So just like Maxwell in the SEMH school, a question I've got for myself and for you is, how am I going to protect these children into thinking about the past? How am I going to get them to care about the world? So I'm not just thinking history here, I'm thinking geography, I'm thinking literacy, I'm thinking everything. How am I going to get them to care? How am I going to build botheredness? Well, I go back to the Warm School and I talked to the year 3 teacher about it, and we set up a Vikings topic. We look at our Vikings topic and think about how we're going to do it. I go back to the Cold School and check it out. So I meet the teacher, she's a bit harried, and I say to her, what we're doing today, and she said Vikings, and I see the little kid with the tram lines, and I'm like, thumbs up to him, because he recognises me. And I say, what we're doing then with Vikings? And she says, well, we're making a Viking shield. And I say, and this is a really important question, because this goes to the heart of teaching and learning, purpose. I say to her, why? And she says, and she looks at me and I look at her, and we both know. She says, because it's week 3. So in that moment, and I need you to really get this, in that moment, this teacher is slavishly serving the curriculum. And what we need to have as teachers is the curriculum at our disposal. Let me expand, because in that room as well, the TA came out with a trolley, and on the trolley was a load of resources. There was glue sticks, card, scissors, and then really weirdly, a massive tub of glitter. And I'm thinking, they're making a shield here for Vikings, and what's going on with that glitter? It was like the opening minutes of an episode of Casualty. You could just see that bowl of glitter going over. Don't know why that was there, because there's no evidence to suggest that Vikings had shields with glitter on. So it's a difficult moment when I see all that happening. But, you know, it's there. Now, if I go back to the Warm School a minute, we start implementing our Vikings curriculum. The kids walk in, and we start with this. Let's say, nodding, because if you nod, kids nod back. Let's say we live in the time of Vikings. Now, year 3. If we live in the time of Vikings, what wouldn't we have that we have today? Did you hear that question? Because that question is protecting those children into thinking about the past. The first response from the kids was Greggs. Greggs. Vikings didn't have Greggs for your vegan sausage roll. No, they didn't. And you know, in answer to the question I've asked, it's correct. And what's brilliant about it is it invites me to be a bit versatile. Because a kid says Greggs and I say, spot on, they didn't. So if they didn't have Greggs, Ashley, if they didn't have Greggs, what on earth did they eat? And there's the curriculum. There's your should curriculum bubbling up, Viking diet. Now, if we write a list of things we don't have Wi-Fi, they're quick to say stuff like that, technology, Asda, Lidl. There's all the sorts of things we don't have, aeroplanes, trains, all those things. And then we can start thinking, okay, we know what they didn't have. Let's think about what they did have then. What did they have? And we can take our thinking a step further. And I can use a PowerPoint to teach them about Viking life. In fact, in week 2, I said, what buildings do we have in our Viking community? We'd mapped out a Viking community by a river. What what buildings do we have? And a little boy in the room said, we have a school. He's called Zach, this kid. Zach, what have we got? A school, he says. I said, what if we're Vikings then? What do we learn in the school? And Zach says, Bear Grylls. Bear Grylls. And now I know what he's talking about, and you do as well. If we're Vikings and we're learning Bear Grylls, what are we learning? And we might be learning survivalism. He actually says, little Zach, he says, we're learning fishing, because we talked in week 1 about what we were eating, and we decided because there was a river, we eat fish, a lot of fish. So we've got fish, we go fishing, we teach that. Zach, if we're teaching fishing, where do we get fish hooks from? I ask. And he pauses and he says this, from the claws of lions. Now, colleagues, I don't know what to say to that, so I pause. He rescues me by saying, do you want me to show you? And I say yes. And now, anecdote isn't evidence, but all I can say is he did a piece of dramatic movement that clearly depicted the capture and strangulation of a potentially geographically inaccurate lion. And he held up the claw like he's Russell Crowe in Gladiator. As he walked past me back to his seat, he just said, that's how you get a fish hook. And he went and sat down. Now, I would say to you that little boy, he's engaged, but he's beyond that. He's invested. An investment is where learning happens. And the thing that's invested him is that idea of being the Vikings, of being inside a story. In the other school, there's a little boy, his needs aren't being met. He's nicked a glue stick, he's put it on his face, he's put it on his eyebrows, he's put it around his mouth, and he's chucked his face into the glitter. And he's running around now. He's not making any Viking shields. He's running around with a glitter beard. He's not even engaged. Now, the kids in the warm school, with Zach and so on, in week 3, we realised our shields had gone missing. They'd been misplaced. And we needed to go and explore the mountains that were nearby because we had heard tell of a dragon. Now, bringing a dragon into the narrative is actually an excuse to teach Viking and Norse iconography and culture. They were fond of their dragons in their Viking sagas. So in order to go looking for a dragon, a meaning business, some of the girls, the table of girls, said we need to look like warriors, not farmers, and we need to carry our shields and our axes. So we didn't have any shields, so we needed to make some. And there's some children there going into the hills, into the mountains, looking for a dragon. Now, week 6 in the Viking curriculum in both year 3 schools, the big task, the big literacy task was write a Viking saga. Now I'm asking you to consider, where do you think the best Viking sagas are going to be written? In the cold school with the boy with the glitter head? Or in the warm school where we've got to go dragon hunting? The kids in the warm school, they came up with their setting in week 1 and week 2. They've studied Viking sagas, iconography, culture, stories. I think they're ready to do their big piece of writing. And that, colleagues, is a win for the teacher. Now, I'm just going to move on at a bit of a pace now because I know I haven't got long left, but I hope that story makes some sort of sense. In the cold school, the teacher was a hard-working person, a good person, but she was a slave to the curriculum in that school. The curriculum was a cold one. She had no space, if you like, to be creative. And creativity isn't just making Viking shields. Creativity isn't just making Roman mosaics. Creativity actually, I think, or I'd like to suggest to you, is a series of specific teacher acts. Awful people who might say to you, oh, if you're going to be a teacher, don't smile till Christmas. That still gets said, and it amazes me. Smiling, especially for us in primary and early years, smiling is a specific teacher act, as is making learning matter, as is letting potential breathe, finding that child, looking for the gold, the shiny bit of gold in that difficult and challenging young person, finding it and exploiting it in the most positive way. And also a specific teacher act that is creative is being agile enough and having the stance to be able to be flexible and to be able to protect children into complexity. Here's an illustration from a book I wrote. Kids come to class. In year one, they rock up in the morning, they're dropped off by the parents or the carers. What you've got to do then is offer them stepping stones that will get them absolutely protected into the work that you want to do with them. Now, we're really good at getting these things nailed down. Here, if those stepping stones on that image were labelled, here are some possible labels that might be on there. The first one, perhaps, as the kids are navigating that rough river, is expectations. We've got to make sure our children know what is expected of them. And we can't do that just through nagging. We can do it through, we have that broken record technique, don't we? Where we repeat and repeat and it eventually sinks in. But expectations can be present. They can be all around us. We can have them as laminates on walls and so on. We can do it through rule reminder and so on. Kids like it when teachers are explicit about their expectations. Being organised, absolutely, having everything sorted. And if being prepared, if your original plan starts to go awry, you've got to be prepared to whip out a plan B. When I used to plan lessons for observations and so on, for when I was a full-time teacher, and even when I was a student teacher, I always had a plan B. Make sure you've got that. Another stepping stone on helping the kids protect themselves in and protecting them in through your skill is give them some responsibility. Share responsibility with them. And I know you'll be good at that, and you'll have seen good teachers do that. Another stepping stone that really helps children, and well, a couple of them on here, optimism, warmth, and trust. We've got to be that adult that children want to be near. So you've got a choice as an adult. You can either be a radiator, a warm adult that kids want to sort of, metaphorically snuggle up to. I don't mean physically, I mean metaphorically. Or you choose to be a drain. So people don't want to be near you. So which one are you going to be? A radiator is someone who is full of optimism, warmth, and trust. A drain is just someone who stinks, metaphorically and maybe physically. Another way of protecting children into learning is by showing patience, by showing it, by modelling patience. And finally on that list is that idea of UPR, which, colleagues, stands for unconditional positive regard. And that, I'm happy to answer some questions on that when I meet you, but unconditional positive regard, it is quite simply the professional capacity to forgive a child a misdemeanor, to forgive and move on. So not keeping Tamsin in the sort of red area on your behaviour chart for the whole week. You know what I mean? Even though Tamsin is challenging, we need to help her behave, and everything else on that list will protect her into behaving. So I'm just going to start. I've still got a few more things to say, and I hope this is okay and I'm not banging on too long for you. But I just wanted to illustrate one more thing. And this is a school in Sheffield, and that's why I've put it in. The school in Sheffield I went to work in, it's got a special class, and I think they're made up of I think it's year 3 and 4 children who struggled, and they made this one class, and we're all in a porta cabin, and they've all fallen in love with a book, these kids. So I go in and I do some work with them, and I say to these children, oh, sorry, these are the tasks we're doing. We're going to be making a mini roundabout. We're going to be adding to a map, and we're going to be completing a pitch on our whiteboards. The city we are planning is amazing because. And the task is, if you like, is we are thinking as city designers. So if you remember with Billy and year 1 in Leeds, early years in Leeds, we were thinking about helping the farmer. Well, these kids in this class are helping me redesign the city of Sheffield. So I say to the kids, hey, we're going to have a fantastic new city of Sheffield. If we're going to do that, what are we having in it? And the first response is a BP garage. Okay, what else are we having in our fantastic new city? And a child says a subway, but they don't mean an underpass. They mean a Subway sandwich shop. And I say, and it's actually in the BP garage. And I say, what else are we having? And a kid says, streakers. Streakers. And I look at the teacher, you can see her there. The teacher says, it's a hair salon. And what the kids have done is they've described coming out of the housing estate, turning left, and then looking at the buildings, and they've got a BP garage with a Subway, and then a couple of houses, and then Streaker's hair salon, and then they turn into their school. And it makes me feel quite melancholic, that, because when I'm asking the kids for the world, what I'm getting is a very narrow vision. And one thing we can do as teachers, one thing we should do as teachers, is show kids the world, shouldn't we? So we write a list, and the list gets really good, actually. We get a zoo, we get an amusement park, a theme park, we get a helicopter landing pad, and we get a really good list. So that's our model list. And then the kids, as you can see, they start to add to their maps, and they do their pitches. That little girl in the bottom left there, she's saying, the city we are planning is amazing because we're going to have hot tubs. I ask, where? And she says, everywhere, which makes shopping a little bit more exciting than going to Meadowhall. They go to playtime, and when they come back, I've put all their maps together. It's neat, that, isn't it? It looks good, that. I mean, if you were teaching volcanoes, I'd do exactly the same process, and I put a volcano right in the middle there, a dormant volcano that then suddenly comes to life. Little boy in the class, he comes in and he says, where's that going? And he's talking about the road right in the top left-hand corner. That's his map, you see. And this little boy called James says, where's that going, Mr. Roberts? And I say, James, that's going to the old abandoned factory, which no one knows much about. But what we do know is it's going to be demolished. So, James, look at the palm of your hand. Let's say I'm FaceTiming you. So this little boy looks at his palm, and I start talking to him, and he's listening. And what I'm saying to him is, I'm your boss, and I need you to go into that old factory to see if there's anything inside that's worth saving, because it's getting knocked down. But before we go in, you have to get through the nettles and weeds. And at that point, the kids see there's a sheet on the wall that I put up there early doors, and it's got nettles and weeds written on it. And I say to the kids, we have to rip that down, because behind that are the iron gates of the factory. Then we go through the gates, and then we get in. So fast forward, we're all looking at this green sheet, and I tell them to pull it down. So they do. And when they look underneath, I've put another sheet underneath. And on that sheet, I've drawn the iron gates. And on the iron gates are the initials of the once famous factory owner. And when they see that, they're catapulted into the book that they love, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. but they go into a kind of weird meltdown in their heads. You can see it happening because, hang on, this factory's getting demolished. So we've got to get in there and we've got to find out what's going on. So you can see here, I mean, it might be quite clear on the video, I'm not sure, but that Post-it note, all the kids wrote on Post-it notes about what they found inside the old abandoned chocolate factory. And Chloe in the middle there has written, "The everlasting gobstoppers tasted like dust." And the orange Post-it note that you can see on the window there says, "The chocolate river has dried up. It's very sad. Why has this been allowed to happen?" Now, colleagues, this is key. Can you see through their window? Can you see their estate? In this moment, however, the curriculum has lifted them. And I know that sounds grand, but it has. The kids are elevated. And it's that question, why has this been allowed to happen? These kids are engaged, but my goodness me, they're more than that. They're absolutely invested. They are absolutely bothered. So they take over. And they find a light shining under a door, and they find an old man in an eccentrically coloured suit sitting in a cupboard. And he says to the children, "Can you tell me where Charlie Bucket is?" And it carried on, but I've run out of time now. Just a few things just to share with you before we stop. That is where I get the term iterative play from. And if you Google that, learning through play, Zoshlu et al., it's actually some research that Lego did around different types of play. Iterative play obviously is great, as are the others, meaningful play, collaborative play. Iterative play for us is where the children are given dilemmas and problems to solve. And dilemmas and problems are essential to stories. Otherwise, stories are boring. I just want to flash that in front of you again. I know I've not had long with you now, but I hope you've seen that, in a sense, I've brought that to life a little bit. Creativity is using colours, glitter, glue, and all those things. But creativity for us as well is in our approaches in the classroom. I've talked about storytelling in this session. Storytelling, there's also Mantle of the Expert, which is something you might want to go and have a look at. It's a form of storytelling. It's a form of pedagogy. And all of us, me included, are looking for things that work in class. And I've found that Mantle of the Expert and storytelling are good for helping kids learn. So I'm going to meet up with you online at 2 p.m. on the 14th of October. And before then, and I know Jane will give you some instructions, but before then, you can send some questions in to ask me, and I'll do my best to answer them. I've had about 9 coffees so far today, so I've been as animated as I can here. So I hope that's been all right. Just some final thoughts, really. If boys can't stay on task, how can they play Fortnite all weekend? Well, I think Fortnite is basically just a narrative. It's a story like Minecraft before it. That's why kids are obsessed with gaming. It's because it's also social. It's pro-social. So, yeah, more to think about with that. Teaching isn't stunt work. Teaching shouldn't cause danger to life. It's just that it's hard and complex. So I'm hoping some of the stuff I've shared with you helps. If you like what you've heard and you want to just find out a bit more before October the 14th, here's some of the books that I've written and that I'm part of. The working classes, I've got a chapter in that. The tests, if you Google me on the test website, you'll find a lot of my work on there. Little stories that also actually, if you look underneath the stories themselves, they're about pedagogy and practice. My Oops book, which is I think is on your reading list, at the moment you can get 30% off it, the audio version. If you go to independentthinkingpress.com, it costs about £9 instead of £12, but you've got to use that code. So it's NQT 30. I know you're not an NQT yet. Don't tell anyone. But you can use that code to get hold of that. I like Mrs. Edwards. She's my teacher. I like it when she does meth with us. Kids are kids and complex, aren't they? They're human, and so are we. So when we get good ideas, we need to share them and check them, and because some ideas don't work, like that one. Let's obsess on opportunities in the classroom. We've got our should curriculum, our could curriculum. The could curriculum lets us think about what if. It enables us to have an old abandoned factory that once belonged to Charlie and Willy Wonka. And we meet all sorts of different children. And what we can use our curriculum for and our classroom time for is to respect those children and also teach them what it means to be a good person, whilst perhaps simultaneously challenging the world out there. I think you'll get a lot of advice, obviously. You've got a brilliant course going on at Sheffield Hallam. I keep going into class because otherwise I've got nothing to say about teaching and learning. So you'll get lots of, there's lots of research out there. There's lots of people selling books about teaching, particularly behaviour at the moment. And I would suggest you do your homework before you part with your cash and find out if those people selling those things like that, selling tips and stuff, have actually done it, or whether actually for them, it's just that they're writing about some sort of utopia. Teaching is emotional. I hope that's come across in this session. There's a little book which I'm happy to talk more about when we get a chance to speak online in a few weeks. 5 steps to happiness from an 8-year-old. Go and play, have a nice lolly, make friends, love everything, get a dog. So thanks very much for listening to this. I'm just looking at my clock. I think I've put in an hour and I was only asked for 45 minutes. So apologies if it's overrun. I hope it's been worth listening to. If you want to message me before we meet up on that day, drop me a line on my Twitters. Get in touch with me on the Facebooks or Facecloths. Or get in touch on the Instagrams. That's quite exciting, but my name's quite complicated on there. But drop us a line. I'd love to hear from you before the 14th, just so I know that someone's actually watched it. I'm sure you will. And I'm sure it'll be great to have a chat when we all eventually hook up online. So thanks very much. I'll stop sharing this now. Gone big again. So thanks very much. I hope that's been worthwhile and have a great day.